In October 2019, the Mexican government did something considered to be extremely stupid by most security experts. After all, what they just did would put thousands of innocent people in danger and reveal to the entire world that the drug cartels could easily overpower the rule of law. For instance, Ovidio Guzman Lopez, son of the famous drug lord El Chapo, was arrested by the Mexican National Guard on charges of drug trafficking. And right after his arrest, law enforcement agents were very proud of themselves and called it a day. But what they did not expect was the Sinaloa Cartel would go to all lengths necessary to free him, and over 700 highly trained and heavily armed gunmen started attacking government and civilian targets. They completely sieged the city of Culiacán, set multiple vehicles and buildings on fire, killed several hostages, and even threatened to blow up an entire residential building where the family members of the agents involved in Lopez's arrest used to live. To stop this bloodshed, the then president of Mexico decided to release him just a few days later. As you can see, drug cartels are the ones who actually call all the shots in Mexico. And if you want to understand how that came to be, you are in luck, because that's exactly what we will be talking about in this video, so stay tuned. Now, Mexican drug cartels have existed since the 1950s, but since they used to run mostly as small drug smuggling organizations, they barely drew much attention to themselves. However, it all changed in the early 80s. Back then, cocaine trafficking was starting to become a big problem for the US, and so they started to crack down on most drug smuggling routes based out of Colombia. And since Colombia was by far the biggest cocaine producer at the time, this created a huge power vacuum, which was gladly filled by Mexican drug lords who began to smuggle cocaine into US soil at premium prices. Now, even cartel leaders were amazed at how easy and lucrative selling cocaine was. After all, Mexico shares all of its north borders with the US, and so getting cocaine into American soil is as easy as it gets. And not to mention that cocaine was becoming hard to come by because of the US crackdowns, thus making prices in the black market reach historic highs. However, now that cocaine was making it into US soil once again, it didn't take long before the US government took notice and decided to crack down on Mexican cartel operations. The only problem was that cartels started reinvesting their massive profits in recruiting thousands of gunmen and buying military-grade weapons in order to become even more organized and deadly. And as you can probably tell already, this is a sure recipe for disaster. And all hell broke loose when Felix Gallardo was arrested. In case you don't know, Felix Gallardo, also known as the boss of the bosses, was the founder of the Guadalajara cartel and one of the most ruthless cartel leaders Mexico has ever seen. He was arrested on multiple charges including, but not limited to, drug smuggling, racketeering, and even the murder of a federal agent. And after his arrest, law enforcement agencies naively thought that everything would get back to normal and peace would finally be restored. Unfortunately, nobody anticipated that the cartels would retaliate and everything would spiral out of control. Fast forward to today, cocaine trafficking is more lucrative than ever. It is estimated that Mexican cartels make more than $29 billion per year. And sadly, the Mexican drug war is still out of control, and there seems to be no end in sight. For reference, the most powerful drug cartels as of right now are the Juarez Cartel and the Sinaloa Cartel. And needless to say, they are completely ruthless with whoever crosses their path, be it rival cartels, government agencies, or even former allies and family members, as sometimes happens. However, by the time you watch this video, some of these cartels may have already gone extinct and others have risen up. After all, they are constantly fighting one another in order to control drug trafficking routes, cocaine production plants, and street territory. And more often than not, these fights can get pretty violent. For instance, back in 2019, 19 bodies were found hanging on a public street. According to security experts, one cartel did this to warn all the others that nobody should be treading on their territory. And as much as I'd like to say the contrary, events like this one happen with a frightening frequency. All in all, the Mexican drug war is a complete human tragedy, having claimed tens of thousands of lives, transformed Mexico into one of the deadliest countries in the world, and destroyed the livelihood of millions of innocents who have to deal with this harsh reality every single day. Now, on top of all the violence cartels use to squelch their rivals, they also use other unethical methods to make sure they remain on top. First off, drug lords are not at all afraid of bribing and corrupting government officials, often bribing them to turn a blind eye to their operations or take selective action against their enemies. And since they have so much money on their hands, lots of public agents will gladly comply and cooperate with them. In fact, some of the most powerful cartels even take this a step further and finance the election campaigns of powerful career politicians. As an example, Felix Gallardo, the boss of the bosses that we have talked about earlier in this video, used to be close friends with Antonio Toledo, the then governor of the state of Sinaloa. Of course, the governor said at the time that he didn't know about Gallardo's ties to drug trafficking, but that's hard to believe. To make matters worse, most of these drug cartels have also infiltrated themselves in the media, and so they can easily manipulate public opinion on important matters. And if all that wasn't enough already, these cartels are not only ruthless with their rivals, but also with innocent people who refuse to comply with their orders. For instance, back in 2010, 72 bodies were found in a collective ditch in a remote ranch. It is believed that these innocent people were killed because they refused to help one of the local cartels to sell drugs. As you can see, powerful cartels can easily fund and maintain vast paramilitary organizations. And if they get pissed at an enemy cartel, government agency, or innocent civilian, they will stop at nothing in order to get back at them. Needless to say, the civilian population is the ultimate victim of all this bloodshed, since they are completely powerless and have to endure all of this cruelty in order to carry on with their lives. Now, besides perpetuating crime and cruelty, drug cartels are also one of the key proponents of poverty in Mexico. And that's because many young people, instead of pursuing an education and furthering their careers, which is already hard in and of itself in a country like Mexico, prefer to pursue the seemingly easy and fast riches of drug trafficking. Sadly, most of the young men who get into this world end up dead or in jail. To make matters worse, since drug cartel operations go hand in hand with government corruption, most politicians only use their power and influence to serve cartel interests, thus totally disregarding the public good. This in turn causes Mexico to keep going on the wrong path and destroys the quality of life of the average citizen. Now, you would be foolish to think that drug cartels only have influence within Mexico's borders, because these criminal organizations are so powerful that their hands can reach the entire world. First off, cartel violence is one of the key drivers of the illegal immigration problem the US is facing right now. After all, since lots of Mexicans have to stay in the crossfire of this bloody drug war, most of them seek refuge in the US, Mexico's richest and most prosperous neighbor. Sadly, most of these people never make it into the US, with most of them getting deported, imprisoned, or even dead while trying to cross the borders. And for those who do make it to the other side, not all of them can live the American dream, since most of them will struggle to find decent jobs and opportunities. Truly heartbreaking. What's more, most of the gang-related crime that goes on in the US can be traced back to cartel operations. And that's because cartels also have to fight for territory on the other side of the border to sell their drugs for premium prices. And that's because cartels also have to fight for territory on the other side of the border to sell their drugs for premium prices. This in turn forces local gangs to organize themselves and fight each other, thus personally affecting US citizens who should have nothing to do with Mexico's drug war. Sadly, the international influence of Mexican drug cartels seems to be increasing. In fact, the DEA says that all the most powerful Mexican cartels already have active cells within US soil. So as you can see, these criminal organizations are getting more and more powerful as time goes on. Unfortunately, the Mexican drug war looks like it is about to get worse. First, because Mexico shares most of its border with the US, and as long as the US drug market continues to grow, criminals from all over the world will flood the country trying to sell drugs and weapons. Just as Felipe Calderon, former Mexico's president, said in an interview, "We live next to the world's largest drug consumer, and all the world wants to sell them drugs through our door and our window. And we live next to the world's largest arms seller, which is supplying the criminals." To make matters worse, the Mexican government just approved a brand new law that will make it extremely difficult for most U.S. law enforcement agencies to operate on Mexican soil. With this new law, foreign law enforcement officers will be required to report all of their operations to the government, and all Mexican officials who cooperate with foreigners will need written permission from a security panel, as well as disclose their conversations in full. All in all, what this means is that the Mexican government has created insurmountable hurdles for international cooperation, and so it will have to fight drug cartels practically on its own. And in the rare case that U.S. law enforcement agencies manage to go through the giant bureaucracy created by the Mexican government, corrupt government officials, which now will have access to all the sensitive information, will probably leak everything to cartel leaders. So by the look of this new law, we can only assume that things are not getting better anytime soon. Alright, and that was how the drug cartels rule Mexico. As you can see, Mexican drug cartels are extremely powerful, and it seems like Mexican law enforcement agencies are not a match for them at all. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think this bloody drug war is going to end anytime soon? Let me know in the comment section down below. And that's all for today's video. Thanks for watching, and until next time.